I'm gonna let this woman tell it. I'm gonna let this woman tell it better. I'm gonna let her tell it better.
Hello, global citizens. I'm thrilled that all of you are here tonight and that you're using your voices to lift up your communities, our country, and our world. And no matter what issues you're passionate about, no matter what causes you're fighting for, there's one thing all of you can do that I guarantee will make a difference. And that is electing leaders who share your values and will stand up for you in the halls of power. So as a citizen and as an activist, it's critical that you get registered and cast your vote this November and make sure that everyone you know, your friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, make sure all of them are registered and ready to vote too. Our democracy only works with your participation. And that's why I'm so glad that Global Citizens Movement has teamed up with When We All Vote to ensure that every eligible voter casts their vote, not just in the election this November, but in every election for every office. So register to vote today. Sign up to volunteer at whenweallvote.org or text We All Vote to 97779 and get out there and vote on November 6th. Thanks so much and have a great night.
You heard Mrs. Obama. Go register and show up on November 6th. Go vote. I'm voting. What's good? Bye, everybody.
Cardi B.
So we, earlier today, sitting right in this chair, it was crazy, sort of through coincidence, the two big newsmakers of yesterday.
Yeah.
Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona were both here. They've been previously scheduled to appear.
Yep.
I was able to pull Chris Coons aside from Delaware
Nice.
and interview him about everything that went down yesterday, and then the NBC News story now about the restrictions that the White House has put on the FBI investigation.
Yeah.
I got to talk to him about all that. Take a look. All right, I'm here with Delaware Senator Chris Coons, member of the Judiciary Committee, a key player in everything that went down on Friday that led to the current FBI investigation. What feedback have you gotten from your colleagues, both Jeff Flake and Republicans and Democrats, about what happened?
Well, first, Jeff Flake is the real hero here of what happened. He just needed some reassurance to listen to his own conscience and to recognize that the very real doubts he had at the end of Dr. Ford's testimony, and which a number of other colleagues had, were worth taking a pause and investigating. Jeff's first comment to me when we went sort of backstage in the anteroom to talk was, "This is tearing our country apart." He'd been deeply moved. I'd been deeply moved by the number of folks who had spoken to us, talked to us, texted us, emailed us during Dr. Ford's testimony. I heard from people who I'd known my whole life, and I heard from people I'd never met with their stories of sexual assault. And I deeply respect Jeff for standing up to a ton of pressure to demand a one-week pause and an expanded FBI background check. Now the challenge is going to be making that real.
Right, so the big question now is, what is your understanding of who defines and sets the terms of the scope of what the FBI investigates?
Well, the FBI works at the direction of the White House in investigating the background of an administration nominee like Judge Kavanaugh. So it's the White House counsel or the president who says this is the scope of the further investigation. Because they're doing it at the request of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and what Senator Flake said was limited in scope and duration. I support it being 1 week. That's what a compromise is all about. I would have liked longer,
right,
but 1 week, I think, was a key compromise and commitment here. The core issue is, are they going to fully investigate the allegations in front of us? So will they just question 2 or 3 witnesses who we already know all about, like Mark Judge, Judge Kavanaugh, Dr. Ford, or will they question some of the dozen people who've come forward publicly in the press and said what Judge Kavanaugh said wasn't true? I saw him doing this or doing that, drinking with me at Yale or at a certain type of party in high school. Will that be investigated? That's the issue, I think.
Were it the case that the White House were to say, deliver a list of witnesses to the FBI and say, this is the list, only these people and no one else, what would be your reaction to that?
I'd be concerned that that was an attempt to really sharply narrow. Look, if it's a list of 75 witnesses, I'd say, okay, in a week, that's a lot. But if it's a list of 3,
right,
that's an attempt to shut it down and not make this a legitimate background
what's the back and forth now? I mean, I know that these processes are dynamic. Obviously, the FBI is in the executive
branch.
But they also, this is something that happens all the time. There's tons of nominees. There's tons of background checks. They're used to going to senators on relevant committees and having a back and forth about what the senators want to see investigated.
That's right. And I do think it's appropriate for us to offer some input on what we think should or shouldn't be in the scope of this investigation, and they'll take it as they do, take advice or input from senators with typical investigations on Judiciary Committee. Look, time is of the essence. They ought to be doing multiple investigations at the same time. There's multiple allegations currently in front of the committee, and I think it's not hard to figure out the universe of witnesses. It's not 500. It may not even be 50,
right,
but it's got to be more than 5.
But it's not. It's more than 5.
It's more than 5.
There are 3 women who have made on-the-record allegations.
Right.
In addition to Dr. Christine Blasey
and I
Ford.
hope that all of them will offer to be interviewed by the FBI, will come forward and cooperate. There was some concern last night that I think it was Deborah Ramirez. Her attorney was saying that a week is not long enough. This isn't legitimate. She wouldn't cooperate. I think that was misunderstood by some of my colleagues. We spoke back and forth on it. My understanding this morning is she's offering to be questioned and may well be being questioned by the FBI today.
Your friendship with Jeff Flake, which sort of predates, obviously, everything that went down here, and actually is rooted in some common and shared experiences that relate to why we're at the Global Citizen Conference, Global Citizen Concert today. You both did work abroad in sub-Saharan Africa, right?
That's right. We're almost the same age. We're both 55. We're a few months apart. And when we were in our 20s, I spent a semester in Kenya as a college student. He spent time in Zimbabwe as a Mormon missionary. We've both lived and worked in South Africa. He lived and worked in Namibia. This was in the late 80s when the anti-apartheid movement was an absolutely critical part of the politics of the continent and the world. And I was the chair of the Africa subcommittee my first 4 years, and he succeeded me. He's the chair now. We've traveled together to Africa. We've legislated together on Africa, and it's great to be a Global Citizen together.
All right, Senator Chris Coons, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now back to the show. All right, that was my conversation earlier with Chris Coons of Delaware. Of course, we have Joy Reid here, and Jacob Soboroff has joined us as well. One thing I thought was very interesting there, from the outside, right, the way the Senate functions, the rise of sort of partisan maximalism, means that the sort of senator-to-senator relationships are much more frayed. But it was interesting to me that, like, these two men have a relationship specifically because of this stuff, because they've worked on specifically Africa, specifically foreign aid in Africa, and that's given them a kind of shared relationship that was the origin of what happened yesterday.
And you and I talk a lot about the incentives in politics, right? What incentivizes behaviors. And for Jeff Flake, they've shifted a little bit because he's on his way out, right? So he doesn't have the incentive of re-election. He doesn't have to place much to the base, but he still has to maintain the relationship. So he's in a very awkward position, but that personal relationship did allow him to make this deal. Now, I can tell you, just looking at my Twitter feed just for a few minutes as I'm listening to your interview with Senator Coons, there's a lot of concern out there that the deal that they struck, that these two men brought together, may not be as good as it seems because the scope is being more and more limited.
That's right. 7 days. I mean, you have 7 days to do it. Who was ultimately setting the parameters for who was asking these questions from the FBI?
Right.
Today's a day of action, right? Today's about a day of action. It was really nice that the two of them got together, that we were able to delay this to have a further investigation or reopening of the background check. But at the end of the day, this is about what does Jeff Flake do when we get to the floor of the Senate, and will it be any different 7 days from now than it is today or yesterday?
You heard Chris Coons. I mean, I asked him before the NBC News published that piece with two sources saying the White House is basically directing the FBI to
Don
limit the scope.
McGahn is.
Don McGahn in these very specific ways. Coons said, look, 5 witnesses is not, he said, depends on how many people we're talking. 75 witnesses fine, 5 witnesses not okay. And there's a bunch of limitations on that scope that I think are troubling. But we are now ready to go back to the main stage here in Central Park. We are not. I'm kidding. Did I say we were ready?
Cardi B was awesome. Cardi B was so good.
She was so
then we
good.
had to take a break, take a deep breath. Can I say one thing about Cardi B? She got up there and she told everybody to vote. She made a really important point. She said, everybody get out there, vote. You can all vote unless you're felons. Which is true.
But in Florida,
which is true.
There is a move to change that. We talked earlier with Rashad Robinson, and that's absolutely true because there are at least 9 states that have these really sort of post-Civil War era laws that were designed specifically to keep black people from voting.